Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, a very serious subject to hit right off the bat today. Customs and Border Protection agents shot and killed a U.S. citizen in Minneapolis, Minnesota, outside a restaurant on Saturday. The victim is 37-year-old Alex Preddy. He was licensed to carry a firearm, and he had one with him. The available footage does not show every detail of what happened, but Preddy was holding a cell phone rather than his gun when the officers initiated contact and when they began wrestling him to the ground. Trump administration officials, including Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, have already declared the killing completely justified, claiming that Preddy had intended to murder law enforcement agents. But there is no evidence of this, none whatsoever, which is making it difficult for me to avoid the conclusion that, frankly, the administration is just prepared to brazenly lie about what happened. Now, regular viewers will know that I don't say that lightly. I am not generally prone to hyperbole. I think these clashes between law enforcement and the protesters are difficult to scrutinize and have brought out a lot of confident, bold, and wrong claims from people on all sides of the political spectrum. I think it's perfectly plausible that the officer, for instance, who shot Renee Good 2 weeks ago was justified because he did reasonably fear for his life in the moment. That might also be the case here with Alex Preddy once we know more. But that does not excuse members of our government saying things about his death that are verifiably false, and this is becoming a pattern, and I'm getting sick of it. Now Republican officials, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and FBI Director Kash Patel, they are taking the position that merely bringing a gun to a protest is a violation of the law or indication of murderous intent. Seriously, take a look. Here was Patel.
As Kristi said, you cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that simple. You don't have that right to break the law and incite violence. We will, of course, always protect your First Amendment speech. And if you peacefully protest, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you have seen a trend here, not just in Minnesota, but across the country.
That's very wrong. Here was Bessent.
Have you ever gone to a protest, Jonathan?
I mean, we do have a Second Amendment in this country that...
Jonathan, have you ever gone to a protest?
I mean...
have you gone to a protest?
I mean, no, actually, as a reporter covering it.
Okay, I've been to a protest. Yeah. Guess what? I didn't bring a gun. I brought a billboard.
What are they talking about? They're completely wrong. You can bring a gun to a protest. Of course you can. You can vigorously exercise your Second Amendment rights and your First Amendment rights at the same time. Now, video footage of Preddy's death shows federal agents using pepper spray on the protesters. Preddy appears to be recording the altercation with his cell phone, and then after an agent shoves one of the protesters to the ground, Preddy moves to assist her. Several CBP agents then decide to bring Preddy down. It's conceivable that the agent who shot Preddy had the impression he was reaching for a weapon, though the first shot clearly went off after another agent had already disarmed Preddy. It's also possible that the killer didn't have even that much justification. Yet federal authorities have all but ruled out this possibility and are making abjectly false statements in support of their position. Noem has repeatedly claimed it's a fact Preddy intended to harm officers. She said this individual showed up to law enforcement operations with a weapon and dozens of rounds of ammunition. He wasn't there to peacefully protest. He was there to perpetuate violence. Miller flatly asserted, Stephen Miller, that Preddy was a domestic terrorist who tried to assassinate federal law enforcement. Look, I'm sorry, this is not true. They have no evidence of that Preddy wanted to kill anyone. Even if evidence were unexpectedly to come out tomorrow, later today, that he was secretly a would-be assassin, it would still be wrong for officials to state as fact that he had intended to kill, because there are no known facts that establish murder as his motivation. This is a man who was watching officers interact with protesters and recording it on his phone. Contrary to what the Department of Homeland Security wrote on X, he did not approach law enforcement, let alone with a gun drawn. These willful omissions and obvious lies do not inspire confidence on my part that the federal government is interested in discovering the truth of what happened here. That is a glaring indictment of the administration's approach to immigration enforcement specifically and law enforcement in general. And as if quietly conceding that none of the available facts were advancing that narrative, now Republican officials are taking the ludicrous position that possessing a gun in the first place is evidence of intent to cause harm. It is not. Minnesota is a concealed carry state where it is lawful to carry a firearm in a public place. The notion that an individual cannot or should not exercise both his First Amendment and Second Amendment rights simultaneously, that's usually a misguided leftist talking point that I'm used to arguing against. In fact, the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, they took criticism from conservatives and libertarians for becoming squishy on this and advocating against the gun rights of protesters after January 6th. So I'm with Representative Thomas Massey, no surprise there, who wrote on X, carrying a firearm is not a death sentence, it's a constitutionally protected God-given right, and if you don't understand that, you have no business in law enforcement or the government. I'm also with the Gun Owners of America, an advocacy group that writes, the Second Amendment protects Americans' rights to bear arms while protesting, a right the federal government must not infringe upon. More Republicans should take their cues from Massey and from Gun Owners of America. The administration is eager to jettison cherished First and Second Amendment rights to forestall any possibility that a single federal agent might be held responsible for an improper shooting. Look, if they succeed, the GOP will cease to be a political party that even pretends to care about free speech and gun rights. Don't let them succeed at that. So I'm pretty upset about this one. Frankly, it's still somewhat ambiguous. I think it's less ambiguous than the killing of Renee Good, but it doesn't matter. We will find out whatever the facts are. Regardless of what the facts are, what Kristi Noem and Stephen Miller are saying is just not true. They've said he's a domestic terrorist and had a clear motivation there to harm law enforcement. There's no facts to support that. And if you're saying that's our view because he had a gun, well, he's allowed to carry a gun. I support the Second Amendment. So do you people, or so I thought. So they're caught in this really weird contradiction. It's unprofessional. I see a lot of conservatives turning on them. I'm hearing a lot of calls for, send in Tom Homan, please, someone who knows what they're doing. Because Kristi Noem and Kash Patel, this isn't Scott Bessent's job, so he just didn't know what he was talking about there, fine. Kash Patel, Kristi Noem, Stephen Miller, very disappointing right now. Gun rights are sacred to conservatives and libertarians. This is getting ridiculous, and I'm pretty upset about it. And I'm usually not this animated to be against something the administration is doing, but I find this indefensible.
Yeah, there are 100 different people that are co-signing, or probably more at this point, Kristi Noem being impeached. And so I think a lot of people within Congress are upset about it. I think when you look at the blatant lies and the mischaracterization, it makes you see, well, if this is happening publicly, what's happening behind closed doors? Sure. And when we see that local officials have been, no pun intended, iced out of the investigations twice now and complaining about it so much that they had to go make sure that they have access and make sure that nothing inappropriate is happening with some of the details from the scene. I think we all should be nervous. When you think about what's happening in Minneapolis altogether, it looks like a dystopian novel, but the only thing is that it's reality. And I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with the idea that the government is just being so adamant about these things that they don't know are true.
Yeah.
It really doesn't take much courage to me to simply say, I don't like what's going on here. This doesn't feel right. It doesn't take much courage for anybody to do that.
It's so easy for the administration, for Kristi Noem and the others to just say, a man is dead. It is sad a person died. We don't know whether the killing was justified under the reasonable use of force standard yet. We will investigate and find out. These situations are lamentable, and then they can say, and it is Democrats' fault because they will not do law enforcement, immigration enforcement themselves. So we've had to send in federal troops, and that is resulting in these clashes, and so it's on them. They can say that, fine. They just can't, but they can't say he's a domestic terrorist and thus he deserved to die. Like, he was there with his phone. He had a gun. He didn't walk up to law enforcement and point a gun at them. That's what DHS said in that tweet. And I'm glad we have video footage. We're debating all this video footage, but the video footage helps establish that is just absolutely not true. So they're making statements that give me no confidence they're interested in just objectively finding out what happened.
And this is one of those times where I'm actually happy about all the different citizen journalists out there and the impact of social media. Usually during these tough times is when, starting from like the Arab Spring with Twitter back in the day, when social media helps us, because had we just been subjected to take the opinions, which they are opinions, of federal authorities, we would have just been lied to and thought that as the truth until someone told a witness account down the line, which now they're getting several witness accounts on paper legally, but we have video and we have eyes, and none of us are federal prosecutors or investigators. But from what we're understanding and seeing, it doesn't look like the same story that we're being told. And so for these instances, I'm extremely appreciative that we don't have to just rely on he said, she said. We know that now the public has the responsibility to hold their local leaders and then federal leaders to account and say, you have to tell us what happened here and you have to do this fairly.
I agree. That's the power of social media, alternative media, and all those such things.
Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, you can probably guess what we're talking about here. Now, look, it's time to get serious. President Donald Trump is deploying border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota, probably to clean up the mess some other members of the administration, unfortunately, are making. Trump writes on Truth Social, "I am sending Tom Homan to Minnesota tonight. He has not been involved in that area, but knows and likes many of the people there. Tom is tough, but fair, and will report directly to me." Trump apparently listened when Brian Kilmeade made this very suggestion on Fox News, and it's a good one. Take a look.
What I would do is just bring Tom Homan in. Tom Homan's been marginalized. Go in there. Tom Homan's got credibility on the left. He was Barack Obama and Jay Johnson's main guy. He's got credibility, obviously, on the right. He met Donald Trump when Donald Trump started running for president and loved his philosophy on the border and sealed the border. But where's he been? He should go in there, meet with the mayor and governor, and go in there and take charge. He knows this stuff backwards and forwards. There's no more experienced person. He's got the president's trust, but for some reason he's been marginalized in the Minneapolis operation.
Now, the background to all this is that behind the scenes, there's tremendous frustration among immigration enforcement officers and other Republican officials with the job that Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is doing. Under her leadership, immigration enforcement has focused on areas where there's maximum non-compliance from local Democratic authorities. So you can argue these are necessary fights that the administration is picking, but Tom Homan prefers to actually accomplish the job of deporting large numbers of criminal illegal aliens. So maybe it's time to give his approach a shot. Noem, on the other hand, and others, keep making claims they can't back up about the motivations, for instance, of Alex Preddy, who was killed during an altercation with Customs and Border Enforcement over the weekend. Noem and others made the false claims that just carrying a gun is illegal during a protest or during an encounter with law enforcement, which obviously is not true. I can't emphasize that enough. Apparently, Trump is getting fatigued with all this unnecessary controversy. Conservative radio star Eric Erickson wrote on X that he had a, quote, late-night phone call with a senior White House official. Tells me the president's not happy with how the Department of Homeland Security has handled the response to the incident. Now, I'm glad to hear it, because the fact of the matter is that this incident has not been handled well. As I explained yesterday in my radar, it's shameful that anyone in the administration would consider tossing out the Second Amendment, our cherished gun rights, in order to find an excuse not to scrutinize the actions of one specific law enforcement agent. Moreover, we need an impartial investigation. We can't trust what video evidence appears to show us, and apparently we can't trust what certain top officials are going to say. We need to be sober-minded and fair. If there's a justification for the use of force against Preddy or against Renee Good, okay, there's justification. I can't tell from the videos, and if you think you're absolutely certain, you're seeing what you want to see. Now, the administration has a short window to restore confidence in their operations, which they absolutely must do. The American people voted for Trump to carry out deportations of illegal immigrants. No way around it. Especially those who are gang members and fraudsters and a net drain on their communities. They did not vote for and will not tolerate a permanent new police state where American citizens are killed with impunity, and then the administration turns around and lies about the circumstances and motivations of those killings. We demand better from the people running our country. They won't always get everything right, I understand that, but we need to have faith that they are trying and that our liberties, our First and Second Amendment rights, will never be violated. If we lose those, then we really don't have a country anymore. So, Lindsay, a big shakeup is coming to the Minnesota operations. Tom Homan is in. Bovino is out. He is being sent into retirement, effectively.
Yeah. He got cut off all access to his social media.
Yeah, because he keeps fighting with people on social media.
And childish when someone died. Yeah.
Right. And again, this is not the same thing as saying the death was a murder and that the person who did it is guilty. I do not know. We do not know the circumstances. They need to be investigated. They need to be looked at. The people in the administration should just say it is a tragedy that someone got killed, and we are evaluating the circumstances to determine if it was correct to use lethal force or not. We don't want anyone interfering with law enforcement, but of course you can carry a gun consistent with concealed carry rules, and of course you can protest, and we put the blame on Democrats who are not coordinating with us. That is the statement to make. But they keep getting over their skis and saying, well, domestic terrorist, it's a domestic terrorist. Everyone's a domestic terrorist now. We have broadened that concept in a manner that it is no longer useful. So bring in Tom Homan, sort this out. Trump had a great call with Tim Walz, apparently.
Finally.
I was glad to see it, where it sounds like there was some compromising where, okay, they will assist, maybe, will work with Tom Homan to assist in holding on to illegal immigrants who have other crimes. That is the middle ground I have called for all along. That's what I said Virginia had been doing under Glenn Youngkin, a great governor. Abigail Spanberger got rid of that immediately, even though she's a moderate Dem. Fine, not good. But that is what Democrats should be doing, to work with Republicans to do immigration enforcement of the people we are most determined to get rid of. That's what Tom Homan wants to do, and I think it's the right approach. So I think this is all very good, and I'm hoping we see a de-escalation of some of these conflicts that are, and it's not like, well, you just get to interrupt law enforcement and then that's it, they're going to pull back. That's not exactly the case, but we don't need to have we don't need to go out of our way to create chaotic moments where people are getting hurt.
Yeah, I think that what the last few days showed us is that the president and the administration is now looking for an off-ramp, the de-escalation that people were calling for, because they understand this has become and turned into a PR disaster. When we look at the way
A lot of
that it's
Republicans defecting. Yes.
Yeah, and also the responses, and if you just look at Caroline Levitt, she was speaking to reporters yesterday, and reporters kept asking the question in a variety of ways of, do you agree with the statements that Kristi Noem, Bovino, Stephen Miller are making?
And she
said
did not say she did.
She's like, the president is waiting to see it. So the
Right.
president is taking the measured approach that the only federal official that we really heard that from was Tom Homan the first time when Renee Good was killed. And to say that Tom Homan is somebody who we're looking at as moderate when his policies on immigration are very adamant and he wants migrants out of the country, illegal migrants, but he is somebody who's going to go in there and say, well, the job is the job. The job is not aggressive tactics against Americans. The job is not to see Americans die. The job is not to tell people they can't have their First or Second Amendment rights. His tactic is really to look at people who are already criminals or on their last leg of being here and really like give you a last final order of deportation and let's see why you've extended your stay this long. And I think not all the people that are in between trying to figure out how to get permanent citizenship that are contributing to society, not the factory workers that are contributing to society. And so this is a good step. And also it's a great step that I've been saying over and over again, that the local leaders speak to the federal leaders. When we saw Vance go all the way to Minnesota and not speak to any local leaders, I thought that was childish, no matter who makes the first step forward. So the fact that Walz did reach out to the president, which again, kudos to him for making that phone call or asking for that phone call. Now they can have a dialogue that actually gets us a step forward, because talking on TV and berating one another wasn't getting us anywhere besides having two people killed within a certain amount of weeks between one another.
Yeah. There really is a split in approach that you were getting at, which I've emphasized before, between Stephen Miller and Tom Homan. And in fact, the reporting was that Stephen Miller had yelled at Tom Homan's people previously, had a fight with them, because he's like, why are we not, this is Stephen Miller's perspective, why are we not going to Home Depot parking lots and just mass arresting everyone? And what Tom Homan wanted to do was go into the states that are supportive of federal immigration authorities being there and do mass deportations of people who are already being held for other crimes. And then you would make a significant dent in the population, whereas Stephen Miller wants to do it on unwilling law enforcement personalities and do more of a, sweeping neighborhoods and that kind of thing.
And I think this is not the final solution, but this is a step in the right direction.
Well, don't say that.
No, I mean, instead of hearing the president say he wants to invoke the Insurrection Act, instead of hearing the governor say that he wants to call the National Guard on ICE, this is the first time that we're hearing, okay, bringing the temperature down, which is what both sides of the aisle have been calling for, and I think necessary. Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, let's talk about hypocrisy. Now, in response to the killing of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis, Minnesota over the weekend, there's been a lot of attention to so-called Republican hypocrisy on the Second Amendment, on gun rights. Preddy was carrying a gun, and he was licensed to do so. It's not clear if he was still armed when he was shot. Video evidence strongly suggests the Customs and Border Protection agents disarmed him and then shot him dead. Now, in response, several top Republicans have made the wrongful claim Preddy was carrying a gun in some manner that violated the law, either that he brandished it at officers, or that he didn't have the right to bring a gun to a protest or to confront law enforcement while carrying a gun, and all of those ideas are wrong. As I've said, the individuals who pushed them, Patel, Scott Besson, Kristi Noem, are mistaken. There's also this idea I've now seen that he was breaking the law because he wasn't carrying ID, which is required for gun owners. Here was Fox News commentator Joey Jones on that.
Because I've been in that situation. There's a couple of things. Number one, the Second Amendment is a right. I'm not a Second Amendment absolutist. You have the right to carry a weapon to defend yourself, not the privilege. It is a right. Those rights come with restrictions. I think you would understand that more than anyone at this table. One of those restrictions is you have to have your ID and your permit on you. We don't know. Current reports are he didn't have either one of those on, at which point he's not carrying legally. But number two, even beyond that, with the right to carry a firearm comes the responsibility to do it correctly and to do it with foresight and to do it understanding the situation you're walking into.
Now, I like Joey Jones, but the problem with that is the cops didn't actually ask Preddy to show him ID, to show them his ID, and if they had, and he hadn't had it on him, it could have been a $25 fine. So what? The lack of ID doesn't have any impact on whether law enforcement was correct to view him as a threat or not, so let's stop obsessing over that point. It's a non sequitur. Instead, let's robustly defend our principles, and chief among them is the right to bear arms. You can bear arms at protests, you can bear arms while interacting with law enforcement, and if you happen to bear arms while committing a crime like resisting arrest or impeding law enforcement, you can't be killed just because you had a gun on you. You can be killed if you threaten the lives of law enforcement or other people. Let's not pretend that it's the Republicans, however, who are solely being hypocritical about this. It's just not the case. I've actually mostly seen criticisms of Patel and Noem from Republicans. So my question then is, where do Democrats actually stand on this? Because, as I mentioned earlier this week, the ACLU, for instance, backpedaled on whether they support concealed carry rights of protesters. I think many progressives do not believe that protesters should be armed at all. They certainly seem to support every restriction on gun ownership and concealed carry that Democratic legislators can think of. Here was Batya Ungar-Sargon pointing that out.
Obviously, this is like a ridiculous thing to say. I will say I am overjoyed to see liberals and Democrats standing up for the Second Amendment. I think this is the moment of common ground that we've all been waiting for.
Let's not get too crazy now.
Well, I mean, look, as we were discussing in the break.
The Second Amendment.
In that clip, right on cue, the person sitting next to Batya moves to clarify that lack of support for the Second Amendment among Democrats is going to continue. See, it's just a gotcha. They don't support it. Sadly, too many politicians in both parties have been willing to compromise on fundamental Second Amendment rights. I'm perfectly willing to admit that many Republicans have been bad on this issue, but most Democrats, virtually all Democrats, are significantly worse and do favor all sorts of restrictions on gun ownership, on carrying guns, which guns you can buy, on how long it takes to get a gun, and so on. Every time anything goes wrong concerning a gun, we are told by Democrats that we need common sense gun control, whatever that is. Are they now saying in the wake of Preddy's death that they no longer support that? Please help me make it make sense.
Robby, this call out is a sleight of hand. I don't like it.
Oh,
from
really?
you. I think it's a really low hanging fruit for you.
Okay.
You try to shift the burden from the fact that Republicans and the federal administration were trying to criminalize a victim and use things that go against policies that they put forward and argue for often in a case where it works against the federal agents that they sent into the city. Mm-hmm. And I think when you talk about losing a life and the fact that the ACLU and other Democrats are arguing, they're saying that they don't want state overreach, they don't want unjustified killings. And so they're leaning on the fact that if your argument is that he had a gun on him and that automatically was a threat, that makes no sense not only to the stance that Republicans usually run on, but also to the fact that his civil liberties were violated.
Oh, I agree, but that's what I'm saying.
And so Democrats are allowed to call that out without being Second Amendment purity tests and passing them.
No,
They're
do Democrats believe that guns should be at protests?
You're asking somebody, I told you that I don't fall in line with any party on this specifically. I feel like people should own guns. My partner is from Texas. Like, sometimes it's passed down your lineage. I don't think there's a problem with it. I believe in the Second Amendment. But I also think that there are people that in Republican states like Florida that support things like red flag laws and other things that need to be implemented so we can avoid things like mass shootings. So we can
I don't even support red flag laws.
Well, I do. And so I'm saying that there are smart measures that can be put in place to protect people in instances where they need protection, like when somebody grabs a gun and kills people.
To a protest? I'm just asking. Again, The
No, but the people saying
ACLU
don't
moved
bring
toward that position as a result of January 6th.
the people saying don't bring a gun to a protest is the president yesterday. That's what he said when he was asked outside.
Well, and I disagree with him. He's
Exactly.
wrong about
so
that.
it's not to say, oh, let me figure out how to sleight a hand and point the blame on Democrats.
What I'm pointing
Let's
out
look
is
at
that
the issue at
he's
hand.
adapting the Democratic position on this issue.
But where Democrats stand on guns is that we need smart, common sense gun reform.
What does that
laws.
mean?
That means things like red flag laws that work in places like Florida. That means implementing things. That means background checks that are more clear and concise to make sure that people that have mental health history are not accessing guns. I mean, these are smart reforms that everybody can get on board with. It means that conversations, like when we look at situations like Minnesota and how Walz finally called the president, and now we're having some forward movement with Tom Homan, that could have happened months ago. It means that these conversations about guns don't need to happen on the
I don't
back
think
of
any of
deaths
those things are
and
going to
shootings.
lower gun deaths.
No,
I
I'm
don't
saying the
support
fact that there's a conversation led to progress, and we
well,
always have
lower
these
gun deaths
conversations
is
after
arresting
someone
people
dies.
who possess illegal firearms, illegal because they've already have a criminal conviction, and thus they're not allowed to carry handguns anymore. Arresting those people, that would reduce crime dramatically, but we're not willing to do that, I guess, because we don't arrest criminals anymore.
Well, I think the solution is that it's so bad that the administration dropped the ball so far on this that they want to look at Democrats and now say, but what are you doing here? Not going to work.
I'm not saying what are you doing here.
Not going to work.
Support the Second
Not going to
Amendment
work.
anyway.
It's saying
so why do you
a
care
person with
that he was allowed to carry a gun by our rules?
Because gun control laws are valid unless you're protesting something the administration doesn't like, and then you deserve to die. That's basically the message that's being sent. And we need to focus on the fact that people actually died in Minnesota and not say, well, what did Democrats say 3 years ago? Like, no, that's not at hand. The problem at hand is that 2 people died in the last month in Minnesota, and they're blaming the fact that he had a gun in a holster as a problem because it's a state where you can have that concealed carry.
I agree.
So I'm just like not
that's
understanding why this is even being brought up right now when
Right.
someone died, and the investigation is not even
But
transparent.
my problem with what Republicans are saying is that it's a standard Democratic talking point and point of view that your gun rights should be more limited than what the Second Amendment allows.
Right, but they don't have to pass a purity test to answer and respond to the fact that there was an unjustified killing in Minnesota about gun laws. I don't think that you have to have both. You can feel that strongly about it and also say that he didn't deserve to die. And according to our laws right now, he was allowed to carry that gun. They're pointing out a fact. That doesn't mean they need to support every single thing that comes with the gun changes that Republicans would like to see. But I'm Robby's biggest fan. Let's start there. What's on your radar?
Let's get to it. Well, why are so many left-wingers still denying that Charlie Kirk was killed by someone on their team? It's been months, and I thought this vicious lie had been debunked numerous times, but here we go again. Tiffany Cross is a progressive pundit and podcast host. She previously had a show on MSNBC, and now she makes occasional appearances on CNN. This week, she joined the panel for Abby Phillips' show alongside legal analyst Eli Honig, a moderate and also TV personality, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, who's a libertarian-ish leaning conservative, moderate conservative. It did not go well. Right off the bat, Tiffany Cross repeated the provably false claim that Charlie Kirk was murdered by a right-wing extremist, and then she conjured up this lie during a discussion of the recent attack on Representative Ilhan Omar, who was assaulted by a deranged man who squirted an unknown liquid substance at her while she was speaking. Honig condemned this act of political violence, as everyone should. I condemn it as well. But then he made the very fair observation that there's plenty of extremism on both sides. He went out of his way to assert that he did not necessarily think there were exactly equal amounts on both sides, only that conservative figures faced violence too, like Trump, like Kirk. But when he mentioned Kirk, Cross interrupted him to say that Kirk had been killed by a right-wing person. Take a look.
I take your point, and I accept the data. I'm not saying it's exactly 50-50 equal, but let's also not forget Charlie Kirk was murdered. The president,
not by a left-wing extremist. That person espoused very right-wing extremists.
Look, if you look at the targets, if you look at people in office, there's
the right attacks the right.
People on, but there's Josh Shapiro, there's Melissa Horton, now there's Ilhan Omar on this side, there's Donald Trump on this side, there's Charlie Kirk on this side.
But you're saying that, but those
I'm not saying it's exactly
people.
mathematically equal.
But it's not even analogous.
Take your data.
It's not even analogous.
The rhetoric on both sides. The fact that there was an assassination attempt on the
it's not disingenuous. That is BS. And even the attacks that you're referencing, Ellie, those were right-wing people. Like, give me the example.
So what she just said is a lie. Now, this notion that Tyler Robinson, Kirk's alleged killer, had right-wing motivations has apparently, I guess, remained appealing for some leftists. I had no idea. Ever since the progressive Substack writer Heather Cox Richardson helped to mainstream this idea in the immediate aftermath of the shocking murder. Nevertheless, it is absolutely false. While Robinson did indeed come from a Republican family, his own motivation for committing the assassination was that he specifically disliked the things Kirk had said about transgender people. We know this because Robinson confessed to it in his message to his romantic partner, who was a transgender individual. He wrote that he felt compelled to take action to stop Kirk from spreading hate against the transgender community. This is not really open to debate. Robinson is not a right-wing extremist, and his stated reasons for murdering Kirk were characteristic of left-wing thinking. Now, perhaps you can forgive a commentator for giving that wrong if it's before all the facts come in, but at this point, months after Kirk's death, Cross is just repeating something that is completely debunked. And then, for good measure, she also argued with O'Leary about whether new recruits who have joined Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, are members of the Proud Boys, a far-right militia group. Cross asserted that she knew, for a fact, that Proud Boys had joined ICE, and she cited as evidence the presence of what she described as white supremacist tattoos on the necks of some ICE officers. Take a look at this.
Furthermore, there's a reason why we have not seen a resurgence of the Proud Boys. And that is because I believe a lot of them are likely made ICE officers. Again, I've said this on the show before, I've not seen any deep dive reporting into who these people are, but they certainly adopt a lot of the ideology, a lot of the tactics, a lot of the violent tactics, a lot of the wearing masks.
When challenged by O'Leary, and to her credit, Abby Phillip, Cross doubled down.
Tiffany, you're saying that you're just making a supposition here. There's no concrete evidence.
You got to be careful. That's way
there was some supports. There
was some men and women serving the government.
We have seen white supremacist tattoos.
Risking their lives, serving the government.
Risking their lives, they're taking lives,
You're calling them Proud Boy militia. Did you say that?
Well, I did not call them Proud Boy militia, but I think it's disgraceful that you're sitting here. I'm actually not. But I think that there are white supremacist tattoos on their
necks. White supremacist federal officers.
Yeah, white supremacist federal officers.
Like, where?
Now, there may be former Proud Boys who are members of law enforcement. There might even be members of law enforcement who do have white nationalist tattoos. It's true, I looked it up, that one ICE agent attracted some attention for having a Norse tattoo that some people claim is a far-right signifier. I would caution about reading too much into this in general, however, because tattoos mean different things to different people. In fact, for 20 years, Graham Plantner, a Democratic candidate for Senate in Maine, had a tattoo that was plausibly associated with Nazi iconography on his chest. He claims he didn't know that's a Totenkopf and what that means. But Tiffany Cross suggested there were so many Proud Boys joining ICE, it was having an effect on the former group's organizing capabilities. She said there's a reason why we've not seen a resurgence of the Proud Boys, and that is because I believe a lot of them are likely made ICE officers. That's not the reason we've seen less from the Proud Boys. We've seen less from the Proud Boys because they were sued, and many of them were put in jail following January 6th. Enrique Tarrio, the former chairman of the Proud Boys, was in prison for 2 years after being convicted of having organized the January 6th riot at the Capitol. Tarrio was also revealed to have been an FBI informant, by the way, in 2012 and 2014. So in that sense, yeah, there have been Proud Boys working for the federal government, but I actually don't think that's what Tiffany Cross meant.
Oh, there's so much here. I know we don't have too much time, but I think...
Come get your girl.
Well, I'm not on the show to defend Tiffany Cross. I don't know her.
Well, it's not. There's no way to defend her.
I don't
Charlie Kirk remark.
On the Charlie Kirk remark, that could be incorrect. I can speak to the broader... I said that's incorrect. Yeah. We can speak to the broader argument. I guess let's start with the fact that she brought up that there's not a balance, and this is what Eli agreed with, that doesn't have to be 50-50 split on the political violence. And you know that a couple weeks or days after Charlie Kirk was killed, that the DOJ removed a really important study from its website that said 85% of political deaths have been from right-wing extremists. And so when the president and his administration take up data that's been studied since 1990, actually, they noted that 227 events that took more than 520 lives were right-wing events, and 42 that took 78 lives.
The big asterisk that doesn't include 9/11.
Which would be what? That would be considered.
Which would be Muslim terror. It wouldn't be right.
But that's what I mean. So why would we include that? I understand that.
So if we just count,
no,
this is why this exercise is silly overall, in my view.
But you have to acknowledge. Wait, let me finish, because there's another layer to this that she's speaking to, calling like the police and ICE and whoever she's referring to as Proud Boys. Obviously, we don't have information about that or facts to prove that. Abby Phillips rightfully asked, what is the data? She said before she started, what's the data? But when you make a broad claim, people will pull it without taking that first part and saying, look, I don't have any deep research into this. Maybe you should pause on saying it. But I will say that when you look at people that are rising within the MAGA coalition, like Nick Fuentes, and people say, I separate certain ideas from this extremely racist man, and he's somebody who's been held up as sort of the future or part of the leader or part of the party. Well, you have to consider that there are racist people that are being compelled to listen to this guy. And then when you see the deaths at like supermarkets or mass shootings when they're churches in Charleston, when they're killing people of color specifically because they have white supremacist ideals, well, you can understand how this is all correlated. And if the right wing is embracing somebody like Nick Fuentes and then people are killing people because of white supremacy ideals, well, what party do you connect that to? And so that's our broader point.
I mean, he advocates racism. He doesn't advocate violence, and I don't think anyone has cited him as an influence who's.
But if the thought is that people of color, whether they're migrants, any people of color, are taking certain areas and too much of the U.S., and it's supposed to be this white normalized place, and so by their presence, they're taking things from you, people want to retaliate. So maybe Nick Fuentes is not arguing violence, and I'm not connecting him and saying that he caused any of the deaths or the shootings. I'm saying if white supremacy is an accepted idea within a certain part of MAGA that follows that man.
Well, I'm not calling for white supremacy to be an accepted idea. White supremacy.
Yeah, no, a lot of people
nonsense.
are arguing that within MAGA right now. They're arguing whether we should embrace this or move forward, because even people that have spoken out, they've been like, look, we can't let the party acknowledge or accept these people. Do we even include them in our coalition? There's been multiple conversations about that. I think that's why the Turning Points Convention was mostly about the beefs within it, because of the fact that Nick Fuentes is brought in the party by people like Tucker Carlson.
I said the beefs are over foreign policy, not really much, not so much over Nick Fuentes, his profile rose among young online right-wing people, primarily, mostly in spite of his racial views. It's about foreign policy. It's about having a different foreign policy.
So nothing has to do with being anti-Semitic or racist. I think that's a huge problem for a lot of people.
I think there's too much anti-Semitism. I've complained about it.
My point. So that's what I'm saying. When you propel people like that, and then there's violence around religion or race, well, Tiffany Cross is just crossing that line.
But she's pretending, she's delegitimizing and saying that it's all, I mean, that's what she said, it's all right-wing violence.
And I said I'm not here to defend her whole entire statement. I'm just trying to make sense of what I heard.